What's up guys, Jay here, and I'm gonna bring you a video that I've been asked about recently, more so as time goes on, as rumors start to emerge about Intel's new Rocket Lake CPU coming out, well, anytime now, technically. Fun fact, it was supposed to come out in March, and then they announced it in January, but boards aren't even made yet, but whatever. I digress. We're gonna talk about whether or not it's worth trying to get, whether or not it's gonna be more powerful than Ryzen, or just some general buying advice on something we know nothing about.
We interrupt this video to bring you a special message from iFixit. No, we interrupt this interruption with this interruption about new stuff from iFixit. Wish you had a new graphics card, but inventory sucks? Fix the inventory problems with iFixit. Whoa, don't drop it. Can't fix that with iFixit. Just kidding, yes you can. Wish you could take iFixit with you anywhere, but your pockets aren't big enough? Introducing the new Moray.
And the new Minnow.
Take them with you anywhere. So get iFixit for your loved ones, or just get them for yourself.
So we already did a video talking about what Intel actually showed at CES 2021. What a weird thing to say, 2021. That sounds so futuristic even for today. Anyway, Rocket Lake high-level details have started to emerge, and it's one of those things that it's kind of funny. I said in the intro of this video that it was supposed to come out in March, and a lot of people who are not authorized to comment, but off the record, have told me that this was supposed to be something announced in March to come out a little bit later. But it's pretty obvious that Intel's been feeling the heat from Ryzen and AMD's, obviously their popular Ryzen platform. So they had to pull it in. And by pulling in the announcement to January, that puts it ahead of any of the board manufacturers being ready to actually deliver on the new Z590 chipset. Yes, Z590 chipset, to take advantage of the new Rocket Lake stuff. I don't know a whole lot necessarily about the node yet. And the reason for that is that last year we saw some mentions in an email to us from Intel saying that it was going to be 10 nanometer ported back to 14. I know I've mentioned that more than once. I don't know what that means. Whether or not it's going to be an actual 10 nanometer, which is kind of interesting because their new Celeron and Pentium CPUs, which were announced for notebooks, are on 10 nanometer. You can expect to see some desktop 10 nanometer stuff come. But one of the things that you have to realize is that the 10th gen 10900K, or now dubbed the 10850K because the 10900K yields are extremely low, to be able to get that 5.3 gigahertz boost on single core or TVB. It's one of those things where the yields were really low, so they actually came out with the 10850K, which was 100 megahertz slower and a little bit more plentiful for roughly the same price. So it has a clock speed advantage over Ryzen. But Ryzen has a fairly significant IPC advantage over 10th gen because of its constant shrinking process. AMD has done a phenomenal job of actually getting their IPC to improve, but they're still lacking a few hundred megahertz on their high-end CPUs versus the Intel stuff. Now, one thing to keep in mind with Ryzen is for the first time on 4000 series CPUs, or excuse me, 5000 series CPUs, the higher the SKU goes, the actual faster it gets. Where before, the more cores you had on Ryzen, they had to slow it down to increase stability. However, with 5000 series CPU, that wasn't the case. They were actually able to give you about a 100 megahertz increase on every tier you went up. So the 5950X actually had a 4.9 gigahertz single core boost clock versus the Intel's up to 5.3 on the 10900K, or realistically 5.2 on the 10850K. Also keep in mind that there are other factors in play with Intel, things like the turbo timer essentially, where it will only run all core boosts for a certain amount of seconds, whereas Ryzen was able to basically just indefinitely run its all core boost. But all core on Intel's flagship CPU of 10th gen was only up to 4.7, 4.8, whereas Ryzen's was significantly lower at up to 4.4, depending on its cooling capabilities. So the reason why I'm telling you all of that is you have to understand kind of where we are today to understand whether or not the next generation is going to be worth it. But this time around on Intel, there's actually a shrink that's taken place, not with the die process, but actually with the amount of cores. Now the 10900K/850K is a 10-core, 20-thread processor that definitely encroached on a lot of their extreme platform processors because those started also at 10 cores, 20 threads for the 10900X. Yeah, 10900K, 10900X, really stupid. One had quad channel, and more PCIe lanes. That was really the only difference to them. But this time, they're gonna be dropping down to an 8-core, 16-thread on its top tier part. And now we're starting to see rumors that it might even be as low as a 6-core, 12-thread. So it's one of those things where it's really starting to look like the buying choice is gonna be very similar to what it is that we've seen all along. And I've said this in previous videos. I know this sounds like a broken record, although I continue to be asked. You need to keep in mind that although you may be following this stuff day in and day out, and you may breathe and sleep PC tech, There's a lot of new people here that are brand new to this and are very confused with the very poor naming conventions that each brand utilizes, and the fact that we've got overlapping generations that are making things just that much more confusing. Now, Ryzen is still going to be your dominant processor when it comes to multitasking. If you can definitely leverage the amount of cores that you're able to take advantage of with Ryzen's mainstream, especially with the 5000 series CPUs and its increased IPC, its increased core clock, the increased cores that you get, because you can get 16 core, 32 thread on mainstream now, which is going to give you 6 cores, 12 threads, or essentially an i5 above the current Intel offering, even that of Rocket Lake. But there's one thing that we're hearing about with Rocket Lake though, and that is the fact that Intel has apparently pulled about a 10 to 11% IPC improvement clock for clock versus their previous generation. So what you're gonna see here is when you do the math of when we do our CPU test and we run a single core locked at 4 gigahertz, that gives you your IPC comparative, or delta right there. So if you take one versus the other, exactly the same frequency, the Intel tends to get just pretty much on by Ryzen because of Ryzen's amazing IPC improvements over the generation that, or the generations that Ryzen's been around, technically now 4th gen. But Intel this time, apparently, that 10th gen ported to 14 or whatever the hell they were talking about did something, because now that narrows the gap. Ryzen core for core, when we did the math, when we compared our 10th gen and added 10 to 11% IPC at that locked at 4 gigahertz clock speed, single core, and added that percentage back to Intel, it still trailed Ryzen, not enough to ever notice, but definitely lower. But it's important to remember that once you remove that artificial limit of 4 gigahertz, the Intel's increased clock speed of now being told is up to 5.3, where they've gotten the yields back where they can single core up to 5.3 reliably, theoretically, because again, 10900K was the same thing, but look, you can't buy one because it turned out that was a lot harder to do than they thought. It's going to make it faster than Ryzen 5000 series once they're allowed to boost up to their normal boost clocks. So that's gonna mean whether or not you need to buy Intel or Ryzen is going to definitely depend on what your use case is. And that's going to sound like a broken record because that's realistically all it comes down to. Are you looking at doing live streaming, not offloading the encoder onto your GPU, which a lot of people do with NVIDIA GPUs these days because the NVENC encoder is really, really efficient. You lose a little bit of quality, but it's extremely efficient and it takes all the load off your CPU and reduces drop frames and such. Are you going to be doing tasks that utilize Blender or any other 3D modeling that can actually leverage the amount of CPU cores that are available to the CPU? Well, I imagine if you're that person, you're probably already offloading it to your GPU as well. So again, that argument starts to not necessarily play in. Do you want to play around with Linux? Do you want to play around with a bunch of VMs or virtual machines? Then the more cores and the more memory, the better. However, if you're looking at just building a kick-ass gaming rig, then it looks like Intel's coming back swinging with that IPC improvement, which again is rumored. We have to test it independently on our own outside of what Intel's rumors are to determine whether or not you're now going to see that FPS increase come back with Intel. Fun fact, when we tested our RTX 3090 at stock speeds with a stock clocked 10900K versus a stock clocked 5900X, not a 5950, but a 5900X, which is even 100 megahertz slower than a 5950, we saw that the RTX 3090 was, on average, faster at 1080p gaming on the Ryzen platform than on our Intel platform. So it's one of those things where, for most of 2020, our recommendations always were, if you're building a computer, period, AMD and Ryzen were going to be the better buy. But there's a couple of other things that you have to think about here. One, memory speeds. We're starting to see a lot of games really do like to utilize fast memory. Ryzen, however, is still going to be a bit limited by the capabilities of the Infinity Fabric. Remember, the CPU chiplets on Ryzen are essentially 2 different CCXs, which have the physical cores on them that are interlinked through something called the Infinity Fabric, and that takes place by utilizing memory. And the memory speed with the Infinity Fabric is going to limit how fast those CPUs communicate with each other. Now, they've definitely improved the latency between them. That's one of the reasons why we saw such a huge performance uptick with 5th gen. It's not 5th gen, 5000 series. However, we're still seeing a 2x Infinity Fabric speed of memory ratio. So what that means is if you're running a 4000 memory, then you would need to run a 2000 clock speed on the Infinity Fabric. The problem is getting anything stable above 1900 has proved to be extremely difficult, artificially limiting how fast the memory is that you can actually put on Ryzen. Whereas Intel is still, as long as the memory controller and the CPU can handle it, XMP profiles of up to 5,000 megahertz have been achieved. I don't have a CPU that can technically do it. Although I do have 5100 megahertz modules, I can't run it. My 10900Ks that I have just are not capable of running memory that fast, even though I try and tune the memory controller as much as possible. So there is still a silicon lottery there when it comes to how fast your memory can be, but you are gonna get faster memory on Intel this time around as well. Unless AMD can start to get its Infinity Fabric and the way that the modules are tuned to start going faster, you're seeing an artificial limit right around 3,800, which is 1,900 times 2. But Ryzen's efficiency has gotten better in that it starts to look like a diminishing return, anything above 3,000 megahertz anyway, and task for task, 3,000 megahertz on AMD and 4,000 megahertz or above on Intel really starts to look like diminishing returns, and you're not getting any sort of benefit to that. So right now, based on the current rumors, and hypothetically a scenario where you could just go out and buy either of these two CPUs, because you can imagine that the Intel stuff when it's launched is going to be sold out immediately as well, is going to be the old recommendation. If what they say is true, if you want to build the best gaming rig that you possibly can, then Intel's really starting to look like it's going to have that edge with its superior clock speed and a caught up or matched IPC to Ryzen. Our math shows it's still going to be a couple of % behind the AMD CPUs. However, the clock speeds are definitely going to give the advantage back to Intel when it comes to gaming performance. And obviously we'll be testing that when it comes out. Who knows when that's going to be? We're probably still a month or two away from getting you guys reviews on any of this stuff when it comes out. So if you have any specific questions on either of these two platforms that you think we should answer during our review, comment down below what you'd like to see us test. What do you guys look for when you're building your computers? Strictly gaming machine? All around work/game? Are you doing content creation? Are you doing professional workflows? I'm curious as to what your guys' use cases are so we can try and better incorporate these types of use cases into our reviews. So there's my talking head on these two. I hope that gives you something to think about. If you're building a gaming machine, you're gonna wanna definitely sign up for notifications when this stuff starts to go live, because just like anything else last year, the shortages this year are going to continue, considering we have a worldwide microchip shortage, which right now is giving all prioritization to the automotive industry, because remember, they all have computers in there too now. And so us lowly PC people are kind of being left out while the automotive industry is also struggling, waiting on the SoCs that they need. So thanks for watching, guys. And as always, we will see you in the next one. And don't forget about our giveaway. You'll hear about it right here. Hey you, before you click off this video, you may or may not be aware, I'm actually doing a worldwide graphics card giveaway where one winner will get to choose either a 6800 XT Merc 319 card from XFX or a 2080 Ti MSI Gaming X Trio from Team NVIDIA. So if you're sitting there right now going, I didn't know about this, how do I enter? Follow the description down below. You guys will find a link to the giveaway video that will give you all the details. Don't wait, because it really sucks to find out about these after they're over.